good evening, everybody. Welcome to another lovely episode of The Principled Statesman. And today we're going to have a very much needed conversation about critical race theory. Does it belong in our education system? Does it not? Pros and cons. And with me, as y'all see right next to me over here, this evening we have Utah State School Board Representative Miss Natalie Cline to help cipher through this. Good evening to you, Miss Natalie.
Good evening. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on this lovely evening. So I wanted to just cut right to the chase here momentarily. What is the curriculum of critical race theory? What does that involve?
Well, so critical race theory is based on ideology that, you've got Ibram Kendi's book about, his book is called How to Be an Anti-Racist, and you've got D'Angelo's book, White Fragility, and their version of racism is not what most people think. Theirs, it means systemic racism, and meaning if the system is racist, then the system has to be destroyed. And that's our American way of life. So I see this as a way to destroy America, essentially, at least how we know it, that as it was set up by the Founding Fathers. And so because they see the Founding Fathers as these white supremacists, right, that set up a system that would favor them. And when that couldn't be farther from the truth, critical race theory, much like 1619 Project is part of that, where their focus is on oppression instead of opportunity. And our founding fathers created a constitution that allowed for all people to have opportunity, even if we haven't lived up to that ideal in the past. We have been making incremental improvements all along. 1960 or 64 was the Civil Rights Act. That was a huge step in fulfilling the American ideal and helped bring equality. Are individuals still struggling with that? Yes, but in large part, we have made so much progress. We voted for a Black president. People practically worship the Black sports players and so many other wonderful Black people that have made it in this country and been successful. And now they're trying to say that Blacks are all victims and the whites are all oppressors, and that we have this unconscious bias that we're born with that we can't do anything about. And so they're kind of putting us in a box, because no matter what you do, you are still in their books a racist. And if you say you're not, that's just evidence that you are. It's completely destructive, because there is nothing good that comes from it. They haven't stated what their end goal is. Especially, there's like I said, there's nothing good that will come of it because it's just about tearing down. And when that is brought into the school, that is especially dangerous. Part of critical race theory is dividing people up into groups and identity groups, right? Where instead of treating us all as equals, as each individual person with acknowledging that they each have intrinsic worth and that no one is better than another. We may all have different values and attitudes and belief systems, but we are all equal and should treat each other with love and kindness the way we would want to be treated. It's just astonishing to me that we live in a day where that is called hateful and bigoted, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. That is the only thing that will help us to unite in our diversity. Critical race theory tries to stamp out our diversity and make us the same, or make certain groups more equal or privileged than others by it's bullying. It's just bullying is what it is. And they don't want to call it that because that's the word that they use in order to push the idea. That they've co-opted all the language so that we have nothing left to defend ourselves with.
Right. I have to agree with you on that 100%, because just based on the fact that they want to bring about the oppressor complex. Well, I mean, let's just keep it real in our own reality here. Like this Facebook platform that we're on, or YouTube, whatever, was produced by a white guy. It was created by a white guy, and you're using the platform open and freely. Most of our big employers in this country are white men and women. I mean, that's just reality. That's fact, right? And the fact for me with critical race theory is I get the point of it, but that's a morality thing. Morality needs to be taught at home.
Yeah.
Right. This is stuff that you teach your women and your young men and young gals as they're growing up through adolescence and teenage years. When you start incorporating that into school, you're literally rendering the family unit useless at this point. They have no purpose. What is the purpose of the mother and the father in the household but to pay the bills? That's it, because they want the education system to teach the children morality. Well, what if this one family is a Muslim family? They don't agree with that. What if it's a black family or a Filipino family or whatever other ethnicity there is, right? It's again, like you said, it's pigeonholing people into victim classes. It's creating victim classes, and really what it says off the top is we're creating an oppressor-oppressee complex when we do this. Right, it's trying to flip the head, saying white supremacy is this boogeyman, right? But yet you want to implement or impose a curriculum that props up the same white supremacy they are fighting against, right? Creating the victim classes, etc. Now I know as of recently, you've kind of been on the front page of the news here in Utah, dealing with the petitions to have you removed from the school board. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, somebody created it. It sounded like a former teacher, from what I gather, that saw something on my campaign Facebook page that's been lying fairly dormant since the wrapping up of the election last November. And I don't know how she came across it and decided that she was offended by it and thought that everybody else should be also, and created this petition in hopes to have me removed from the board, which, there's no Utah law that allows for the removal except for, if I was to commit a felony or to resign. Otherwise, it just have to wait till the next election. But I ran all of those things that she found on my Facebook page, on my campaign Facebook page, were things I posted during my campaign that I ran openly on and discussed at length while I was campaigning. There was nothing secretive or hidden, and my constituents agreed wholeheartedly. The majority of them agreed with my stance. It resonated, or else I would not have received 80,000 plus votes. The person I ran against received 30,000. So, I won by an overwhelming majority, and because what I stand for is what resonates with my constituents. So I'm surprised that they didn't find it sooner, and because I know that there are some people out there that will
They
make a big
did.
to-do over it.
Yeah,
But
they dig for
most of the
information.
things I posted were just things that they shared themselves, links to their sites. And, if they want to call me racist for sharing their own materials from, Black Lives Matter at school.org, I think that's a little ironic. I just want to say straight up that I alluded to it in my comments earlier, but I believe that every child has intrinsic value and worth and should be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their values, attitudes, beliefs, faith, race, gender, but I think that identity needs to be left out of the classroom, meaning these identity groups that are meant to divide us, not bring us together, and to look at the other person that's in a different group as less than. And there's so many kids here, especially here in Utah. This is a pretty homogenous environment here in Utah. We have a large majority of white people, and that's nobody's fault. If they complain that there isn't more teachers of color that represent the few minorities that are in the class, but somehow conclude that we must be racist because we don't have more people of color. It's just because that's what the population is, right? We don't have that many to begin with. And if they're looking for the best teachers, that's kind of a silly notion. But when they say that, we have to, right now there's a big push to hire more people of color because they say children of color do better when they have a teacher that looks like them. Well, if you take, it's just reverse racism. It's just reverse, because if you take the white teacher out of the class and put a colored teacher in there because there is a one or two minority children in there, then what about all the white kids in the class? If what they say is true, that children do better with somebody that looks like them, then what they're really saying is we need to go back to segregated schools.
Right.
And that's taking us back. I've heard that they're accusing me of trying to, teach morality in the schools and take us back 50 years. But that is what would take us back.
Yes, I agree with you 100% there. It's a paradigm for me to try to grasp my head around, because, we had a lot of great leaders along the way that made sure that everybody was treated equal. The Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution covers every person, not a particular identity group or a particular whatever sect you want to be in, or whatever type of group you want to be in. Every person as an individual has equal protection, right?
Yes.
Now, as far as I want to go back to your, to the homogenous community here in Utah, which is very true, right? And when you have those type of environments, some things do lack. And I don't want to talk about the diversity of teachers, but I want to talk about as far as the education is concerned, right? Because, different states have different curriculums because of their demographic, right?
Right.
And I personally, I've talked to Miss Jenny Earl about implementing some Black history into American history books. And I know that y'all are going to be voting on that or talking about that really soon, which I'm excited about, because all history is American history. And if we want to counter, the perfect argument for critical race theory is to teach Black history along with American history, not just 1 month out of the year, not when it's convenient or if it's MLK, right? We have to talk about the people like Benjamin Banneker, that was the architect of Washington, D.C., right? We have to talk about, Frederick Douglass. We need to talk about the Norzel Hurstons. We need to talk about Ida B. Wells, right? All year round.
Yeah.
That's how we get past that.
Right.
And get people educated on it, getting the history implemented into the system, instead of saying, the system is all white supremacist, so we need to change the complete system, instead of adding in what's been missing all of this time.
Well, and the great thing is that there are so many wonderful stories, like you've mentioned some of them, from wonderful Black patriots, early founders, and early elected officials that were taken out of the history books under Woodrow Wilson. They were just removed.
Yep.
These were great patriots, and their stories are worth telling. And they were great because they understood the principles of America and they lived them out. They were people of honor and integrity. They weren't celebrated because they were Black. They weren't celebrated and honored because they were gay, because of some part of their identity. It was because of choices that they made and innovations and accomplishments from just living good lives and doing their best to make our country great, instead of celebrating people that are tearing down those very foundations.
Right.
And I mean, America was made from a diverse group of, people coming from all different countries. So that's American history. Everybody should be a part of that helped to build it and make it great. The people that we shouldn't be celebrating necessarily are those that tear it down. And that doesn't mean they can't be mentioned, but the best way to do that is to go back to original source documents that have not been tampered with or rewritten with a certain agenda behind it. They might say that's, those are biases. They call it bias, right? But they're as much bias as they tend to say we are. The only way to get past bias is to go back to original sources.
That's exactly right.
And then let the kids figure it out themselves,
right?
By studying it, and then let them figure out what they want to think about it. We don't need teachers telling them how to think about or what to think about what they've studied. Just teach them how to think, and they'll figure it out.
Right. That is exactly right. I mean, it even goes to the home when it comes to our history. My parents. I grew up in the Deep South, in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and my parents used to take me to the Confederate statues, Robert E. Lee, Nathan Bedford Forrest, and tell the oral stories that her parents told her about these figures, right? And went to different state parks and things like that, and they had my parents had the stories right in their heads because they had been whitewashed from history. We talk about as we're talking about critical race theory here, and how the whole system is so white supremacist, but the federal government gave land grants to the oldest Black town in the United States called Mound Bayou, Mississippi. I bet you a lot of folks don't even know that. They gave them a land grant to create that city. Eatonville, Florida is another one. Gave them a land grant. If this system was such white supremacy and it was, all racist and the government is racist, they wouldn't have gave land grants to these towns. And there's many more I can name, right? To Black Americans right after Reconstruction to have their own space and create their own prosperity, to create their own economics. And those towns today still thrive today.
Yeah, and it's small business and entrepreneurship. Yes. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Fantastic. Burgess Owens grew up then too, and he has the same story. He said those were tight-knit communities and they were successful because they learned to come together and work hard. There was no victim mentality or blaming somebody else for their problems. They took responsibility, hard work, responsibility, honesty. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it is a victim mentality. I think it's a misinformed mentality because again, if folks understood the history and knew the plight when it came to Black America and how far we came and who fought for us, even the white folks that fought beside us, the Native Americans that fought beside us for civil rights, that tune would change. But these people missed that part of history, and critical race theory literally cancels all of that out. It literally cancels all of it out because it's like that none of that even happened.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, let's reset America and put it on a different timeline, yet going back to a time period where Black American history and American history ran parallel. They were never intertwined. They were taught, you know, if you went to a black school in the South, you were taught black history only and some of the founding. You went to white schools in the South, they didn't teach anything black history. They taught everything from the founding all the way through. Now we're at a point where the history is actually, you know, laying in line like it's supposed to. It's all American history, and these people want to tear it apart.
They're taking it all, undoing it all.
Split it again, and so they can have their timeline, and these people over here are racist, so, you know, they don't belong in American history. And it's just, it baffles me.
Yeah, well, you know, there is part of the communist movement was to create this divide.
Yes.
So that they can get us to fight each other. And that is what they're doing. They're using this to drive a wedge where there wouldn't be one otherwise. They're fomenting this hatred to make us think that we can't get along and that we're so different. And that's just not true. We all bleed red. We all have, you know, we all are human inside. We have needs and wants and desires and hopes and dreams. And so much of that is being crushed under this idea.
Yes. Segregation will not do a single person any good. You know, all it will do is create another reset. Right.
Yeah.
Now, you know, being the you know, the civil libertarian that I am, close to heart, you know, for me personally, separate but equal doesn't bother me, long as the laws are equally applied to everyone evenly. Right. Integration will happen naturally because not everybody knows everything. So the natural integration will happen on its own, right? So
long as everybody is working to become their best self.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And critical race theory literally says, okay, we can be separate and equal, but you can be separate over there, like way over there. Like you're not even in the picture. You are now the oppressed, right? Because we're teaching, you know, you have to be anti-racist. Well, I'm sorry, the word anti-racist is an oxymoron on itself. The language itself is an oxymoron. You can't be
It's reverse racism.
Well, we can't even call it reverse racism. Racism is racism. I mean, either way you look at it, it is still racism. Either way you look at it, right?
Right.
Because people, when they look at anti-racism, they look at it as the definition of racism being a group being in power to oppress, when that is not the true definition of racism. Anybody, any ethnicity, well, I mean, if you want to be technical, there's only 3 races in the world, right? And any of them can be racist.
Right.
Because it's not a power thing. It's not a power thing when it comes to it. It's an individual aspect when it comes to racism. It's an individual.
Right. But if they claim it's systemic or a group, then you can't pin it on anybody and you can't ever solve the problem.
Right.
Because nobody's taking responsibility for it.
That's exactly right.
So if we want to solve the problem, we have to look at individual acts of racism.
That's right.
And
go ahead.
That's again, they're pigeonholing us into a place where there is no solution. This will only drive hate and chaos and violence. There is nothing good that will come out of this. It hurts white people. It hurts Black people. And it especially hurts children.
Yes. Yes, children have innocent minds, and they're only to be taught their morality from their parents and how they live, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that child comes from a racist environment, then so be it. That is their individual liberty, to govern their family, teach their family as they wish. Do we condone it? No, we don't condone it.
No,
But
but
as an
yeah,
individual, they can do whatever they want to, and we don't need the education system telling people, right, that they need to teach their children a certain way. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have the children turning on their parents. Right?
yes,
We have seen many instances where children have came home and shot their parents or beat
yeah,
them up with baseball bats because of what someone else told their child, and they're like, "Well, I wasn't taught that," and then they
yeah.
get this bigoted mouth
Well,
and
that
they
and
go and hurt their parents.
yeah, well, that was one of the intents of the early progressive education, the founders of progressive education.
Right.
Their goal was to help the children unlearn what their parents taught them, saying that that's backwards, and in order to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs of the children to be more accepting of a socialist, communist type world. So they had to, it's just retraining the children to accept a more socialistic type of government or communistic government instead of our free government based on principles of liberty and self-governance.
Right. That's yeah. You're exactly right. I mean, liberty is the basis of everything, right? And with that, when we talk equality, like the people that back critical race theory, when we talk equality, they don't talk about equity. Equity is the bedrock of equality. If you can't get equity, there is no way there's going to be any type of equality is going to happen. And when you try to pigeonhole people or bully people into thinking they are inferior, they are creating a supremacist complex for themselves. And
Yeah.
I don't think many actually see it that way, right? Again, going back to the oppressor oppressee
Right.
complex that we were just talking about. You can't sit here and say white people are the devil or white people are the white supremacy and try to bully them into what they call now white fragility.
Right. For white submission. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. To make it.
So now they flipped it around so that they're on the top and they're actually the ones oppressing instead of, the intersectionality chart. I don't know if you've seen that, where it's like a pie chart that's divided 30 different ways for all the different classes or identity groups. And I mean, just the chart alone shows it is meant to divide us into a tribal kind of nation, tribalism, where we're warring with one another, where if what we need is to come together, come out of the fringes of that pie chart and come to the center, the part that unifies us all. And those are the principles of liberty. That's our Constitution. Those are things that we can all get behind. But they've undermined that by saying that the founders are white supremacists. Instead of looking at the principles themselves, they're just vilifying those that created it and ignoring the principles that are in it and the laws that were put in place to protect all people.
That's it.
We have to get back to that which unifies us. And, you mentioned the word equity, and I kind of winced at that because equity and equality are polar opposites if you understand how the left uses the word equity.
Right.
They're saying we have to level the playing field, right? We have to, and in schools, yes, we want to create equal opportunities and equal resources so that every child has an equal chance, right? But when they put in the word equity, they're talking about groups, the group identities again. Right, making one group equal with the other, and instead of looking at the individual, because you're going to always have disparities in groups, and then they use the data that shows the disparities between groups as a reason to take away from one and give to the other.
Right.
When it's the individual and the individual's family that are creating those disparities. If you want to look at, they've got how Black children are doing compared to white children, and usually they fall short, but that disparity is not necessarily because of lack of resources or neglect from the teacher. They're not giving that child less attention. That child's in the same class, learning all the same things. They have access to the same books. And, if you want to see where the real disparity lies, look at the family structure the child comes from. Look at the training that they're getting in their home or not getting, right? So many of the Democratic policies from the Democrat Party created a system that incentivized fatherless families.
Right.
And every study out there shows that children do best when they come from a home with a mother and a father, because they need what both of those provide for them.
Right.
In the terms of stability and resources and support. And when it's just a single parent home, a mom working 3 jobs, yeah, that child's not going to do as well, because they don't have as much of the time and help and support from that parent. They're fending for themselves. That's where the disparities come in, and that's not something the schools can fix.
No, you're right.
And if we keep using that as the excuse for taking away rights, individual rights from certain people, or vilifying certain people, then we hurt everybody. What we need to be doing is doing what we can, finding ways to strengthen the family without the state going in and intruding in that relationship. Mm-hmm. But find ways to, and if that child needs a little extra help, then you look at each child on an individual basis and help where needed, but you don't change the whole system to accommodate for the one.
Right.
Because then it brings the whole system down to the lowest common denominator. And then then that's taken away from kids that would be thriving. And so that's why we've had a consistent dumbing down of our education system for the last several decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be if you look at the tests that were given to 8th graders, back in the early 1900s, when it only went to 8th grade, and they had to pass this citizenship test or civics test in order to graduate. You give that same test now to kids that are in college. And David Barton from Texas, he's done this every summer. He holds a camp for like a U.S. history camp for these graduates or kids that are in college to come out, some of the brightest in their class. And he's like, I have not had a student yet that has been able to pass that test that all 8th graders had to pass back then. And we think we're so much smarter.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. I want to go back real quick on the equity thing, right? Because we know the left changes definitions to words to kind of fit what they want, right?
Yeah.
But
they call it strategic ambiguity. That's the critical race theorists' own words.
Yes, that is exactly correct. Equity. Again, equity, right? We have to make sure that everyone has the equal opportunity, right, to do whatever they want. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't have the constitutional equity, we cannot get to equality, because now you're singling out individuals or groups saying you don't deserve it, you deserve it more. If anytime there's a protected class, we're going to have injustice and inequity. Yes, every single time. And to the other part about when you mentioned about the fatherless homes, things like that, a lot. What people don't understand also is not only is that policy has affected the Black community for decades, it's affecting the white community even more now because of, again, we're having economic issues, right? When they started rolling down the pike in the late 80s, right, the trailer parks started flourishing, right? And then we know in a lot of states your property tax dollars go to education. Mm-hmm. You're having school districts, right, and this goes back to the systemic racism piece a little bit, but I'll get there in a second. When you have a community of low property values, what do you think your education system is going to look like in that district? I mean, you can't, you can't get past that. You can't
Yeah.
just say, "Oh, we're going to inject this and throw money at it." When throwing money at it, we know when the government does that, creates more problems than what it's worth. Now, I
Right.
want
Well, and
to.
that's what they keep saying. We just need to give those, we need to keep redistributing the wealth, take the
Mm-hmm.
property taxes. That's what they're trying to do right now. Well, they have a funding study that says, this is what needs to happen. We need to take some of the property taxes from this more wealthy area and give it to the poorer area, which sounds good in practice. But if the money is not used wisely, then it's just taking away from the haves and giving to the have-nots, thinking it's going to equal it out.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reason that there are other reasons that play into why certain communities struggle.
Yes, that is exactly
And
right.
that money won't fix.
Right. That's exactly right. And then going back, to the systemic racism piece, right? And I always have this uncomfortable conversation with a lot of people because we have to, people have to understand, right? Redlining was a thing. It was a thing for a very long
The
time.
Democrat policy, yeah.
Yes, and it pigeonholed a lot of cities, and who lived in the cities? Mostly minorities lived in the cities. And then when FDR started the suburban project, all of all of the well-to-do people left the city, went to the suburbs. Then what happened? The jobs left the cities and went to the suburbs where the workers were. Now you have people in these cities that are redlined. Their property values are nothing, and they can't leave. Hence, creating again that property tax laws, education. With that, failing infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then now these people, they probably can't travel the 15 miles because they can't get a car because of what, I mean, we're talking Jim Crow, Black Codes era, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of roadblocks going on here.
Yeah.
They couldn't get to these jobs 15 miles away. So they had to settle for whatever was left there and then fight over those jobs while still trying to maintain their homes. And a lot of people lost their homes and become homeless because they couldn't, they could not, you know what I mean? They couldn't work those jobs, right? So people want to talk about systemic racism. Let's start there, right? People don't want to start with that part of the conversation, the opposition. They don't want to start there on where it's going on. Now, redlining.
Yeah, it's the policies we need to look at.
Exactly. Redlining doesn't exist anymore per se, but it does. There has been reports over the last 10, 15 years where you would have property assessors coming out and lowballing the property, and then people getting second, third opinions, and it's like it's almost double that. So we kind of still have a little bit of that going on, but it's on an individual basis. It's not a systemic problem or a policy problem anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have these communities that have been devalued over the last 50 to 60 years because of the redlining and the failing infrastructure and the high crime that is in these areas. It's a trap. It's a poverty trap.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do we fix that? We have to boost the economics in these cities, boost the property values, right? To create, that equity we were just talking about, right? That, making sure everybody has the equal opportunity to pursue life, liberty, and the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
But as long as we don't fix that problem, then we're going to keep going. We're just going to keep bouncing the ball off the wall and hitting ourselves in the head with it because it goes nowhere.
Yeah. I'm just kicking myself because I can't remember exactly, but I'll have to find it. But I came across an article. I'm trying to remember who it was by, but they talk about if we want to raise the opportunity for everybody to succeed, it's not about making certain policies for blacks or certain policies for whites. It's if you put the right policies in place and you do it right, everybody will benefit. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to lift everybody. That's the system that they put in place, that our founding fathers put in place. And we've tweaked it a lot since then and not always for the better. But if we can get back to those correct policies, that don't pigeonhole certain groups, then we open it up for everyone to flourish. And we could have a renaissance. We don't need a reset. We need a renaissance or a restoration of those things that worked, that caused us to take that 5,000 year leap from the founding of from 1820 to now. We saw such a huge leap forward. I mean, real progress as far as the industrial age and then the medical age, the pharmaceutical age, and the technological age. I mean, we've had so many incredible advancements in such a short time.
Yes, we have.
Because we created a system where everybody could flourish. And now we're there. I'd like to think the best and not think that people are intentionally putting policies in place that are hurting people. But I think that there may be a lot of that going on as well. And because I don't understand why you would ever want to hold somebody down, but I know that is happening. And that's what we need to identify and say, okay, what policy or law or practice is going on that is creating this? It's not that, all white people are racist against Black people. That doesn't solve the problem. We have to look at the issue and find what went wrong. What policy is in place that is crippling or putting up a blockade for everybody to flourish, instead of spinning our wheels blaming each other. Let's find the policies that need fixing and fix that.
That's exactly right.
But in a way that benefits everyone, not just certain groups.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, we do. I mean, the founders, regardless of what people think of their history, they had the right principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The bad actors along the way manipulated it and twisted it the way they wanted to
control.
To control and cause the disparities that that's actually going on throughout history. And I think everyone, I don't care what creed you are, should be happy to live in what is the freest country in the world, regardless of our disparities, right? We shouldn't be trying to change the system. We should be targeting particular policy that is creating the disparity. And I think everyone can get on board with that if they understand that concept. Yeah. But a lot of people, they just want to just flip the table and be like, no, we're done here, instead of looking, okay, what's causing this disparity? Okay, it's this. Okay, we need to attack this policy.
Right. And you know what? We're not going to have people smart enough to figure that out if we don't fix the family.
Yeah.
If we can't fix the family and strengthen the family so that children can grow up in an environment where they are able to learn and flourish and grow, then nothing's going to get better. Every problem that we face in this country is a symptom of families that are the weakening of the family.
Yes. And
there's a lot of policies that incentivize the weakening of the family, because if government can weaken the family, it gives them more power.
That's right. That's exactly.
And so, if we always say it's a policy problem, while that may be true, again, it's just another finger to point instead of taking responsibility. It requires personal responsibility and to stop casting the blame and looking to blame somebody else for your problems.
Right. That's exactly.
Because there are lots of people that are born into poverty and into hard situations, and they work their way out of it. Ben Carson is a great example. If you haven't watched his movie Gifted Hands,
oh yeah,
he came from a very economically privileged childhood with a mother that couldn't even read, a single mom, and she decided to turn that TV off and get those kids reading books and writing papers, even though she herself couldn't, and using their time to better themselves.
Right.
And look at him now.
Yeah.
Right.
There's just something like kindred, Clarence Thomas.
Yeah. Clarence Thomas.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the guys I looked up to growing up.
Yep.
Because he's part of my clan theoretically. I'm Geechee, right? We're from South Carolina, Georgia area, and he's from Pinpoint, Georgia. So we're probably all related somehow. I don't know how far back what our link is, but it's we get through the adversity, right? Because there's a lot of people, what people care to turn off is the fact that there's people out here that will help you get to where you want to be if you're doing the right thing,
Right.
regardless of whatever business you're doing, or you're trying to get into politics, whatever. There's going to be people along the way that will give you a hand up and be like,
Yeah.
hey, you should do it this way. This is what liberty and freedom and individuality is about.
Right.
Holding each other accountable and helping each other out. And even going back to um, what you're saying about the breakdown of the family, on the weakening of the family. One of the biggest issues that has been coming up in the news the last 3 years, actually all through Trump's presidency, was the fact that there were teachers literally pushing anti-Trump propaganda in the classroom to the
Yeah.
students.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the school districts were like, oh, okay, whatever, and it's like that's a complete subversion of the parents that pay the taxes to pay the salaries.
Yeah.
But there
Yeah.
was no discipline there on that. There was no discipline on that at all. And I was kind of appalled when I started seeing this stuff come out. I said, why isn't someone saying anything about it? I mean, I personally put out 3 or 4 press releases about it.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like everybody was just okay
Yeah.
with that, with teachers pushing their political views on students, when that's,
Right.
again, that's the parents' responsibility
Exactly.
to teach that morality. I mean, we have to these. I personally, I think, and it might be kind of harsh,
Right.
but I think the educators that do this stuff should be fired and removed immediately.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they should just be dealt with.
They are undermining the parent's role. And when the parent, there is sacred ground. When you step into that realm of teaching a child what to believe, you're on sacred ground.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, and the parent is the primary educator of that child. And if you undermine what the parent is taught, or subvert that, that's like mental kidnapping of a child. And
Yes.
that child is the parent's most prized possession. And you go in there and you start to try, and it's a religion. Just as much as they wouldn't want us to go in and teach the kids in the school our religion,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want them teaching our children their religion.
Right.
They may not call it a religion, but that's what it is. It's a set of beliefs, an ideological set of beliefs that informs a child's decisions throughout their life. That is the parent's role, and they have no business stepping into that arena and mentally kidnapping that child away from their parents.
Right. And that's exactly what critical race theory would do in our school system. That's exactly what it would do. It would just completely take a child's mind from what their parents taught them and go against their own morals and principles that they have embraced from their family for decades, generations, right?
Right.
And we have to we have to come up with a solution to counter this kind of critical race theory, which y'all are doing with the teaching of integrating more Black history into the American history books, which is an awesome idea. I'm like 2,000% on board with that one, and that will help with the quote unquote racial disparity these people talk about all the time, because a child doesn't know a person color skin, and you shouldn't teach it to them, right? In the education system. If the parents want to say that's a Black kid, well, that's that parent that wants to do that, or that's a Filipino kid, or whatever. Right. So
and it's really hurtful to a child when they are put in a position of having to decide, do I believe my teacher or do I believe my parent? To put a child in that position, I mean, they say that all the time, like for families of, parents that divorce, they tell the parents, you don't use your child as, you don't have a tug of war with your child, that hurts them. You don't use them to hurt each other, right? And when you put a child in the classroom and they have to decide who to believe, the parent or the teacher, when they're both authority figures in their life, that's an unfair position to put the child in, and really is damaging. It's very damaging. A child shouldn't have to be put in that position. I think, if we can just do, maybe we need, instead of diversity or diversity training or equity training in the classroom, maybe we should do training for the teachers on how to stay politically, socially neutral in their teaching.
That's exactly correct. You have to, you already have, teachers already have enough responsibility in teaching our children, arithmetic, reading, writing, spelling, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But to add another, or let me say this, allow them to add their piece of what should be socially accepted or et cetera, is already putting a load on them already. Right. And when the school districts see this, they should be shutting this down almost immediately. Like it just should be like, no, we're done here. You do it again, you're out, you're done. And I think when school districts start doing that, people will get the message not to bring your social and political propaganda into the classroom, because if they don't, the parents will.
Right.
The parents will. And if there's a lot of things parents can do, and and a lot of them don't understand the power that they have, over these things. Besides the state school board, I mean, we're talking even on the district level, right? How much power the property taxpayer has, right?
But they don't. The parents need help because they've kind of been asleep for the last few decades, thinking that our society is prospering and they just turn their kids over to the experts and assumed or just hopeful thinking that their kids would be okay. And gone are the days where you can just send your child to school and hope that everything's going to be okay. You've got to understand what the laws are. You have to demand transparency from your schools. You have to go in and say, I want to see everything that you're teaching. I want you to open up the computer and log me in as a student so I can see what the students are seeing, not put me in a parent portal that's going to show me a watered down version of what the kids are actually being taught.
Right.
I need to see it all.
Right. That's right. And the thing with COVID and the online schooling really exposed a lot. It exposed a lot to the parents on what the teachers are teaching their children. And again, I've been tracking this all through COVID and just watching the news reports and things of that nature. And some of the parents are saying, I can't believe this teacher was talking about Adolf Hitler, equating Adolf Hitler to Trump and all this stuff. And the kid was like, I don't want to hear it. And then the kid ended up getting suspended from school for talking back to the teacher. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, and the parents saw this, was like, wait, I'm not paying for this.
Yeah.
Where's the lesson, right? And honestly, I'll be honest, I really think that when it comes to our tax dollars and paying for education, I think the child should be able to have some sort of, I wouldn't say, it gets tricky because, you have a Fourth Amendment issue going on here too, but there's got to be some sort of way that the child can report or record what's happening in the classroom in segments to bring home to their parents and say, hey, this is what my teacher is saying, right? Instead of it being secondhand or, because we know that we've seen the situations where the teachers will play off what the kid is saying, like, oh, no, I really didn't say that. He didn't say it that way. There's got to be a way to hold these guys accountable. I don't know what that looks like without infringing on the Fourth Amendment, but there's got to be some sort of accountability aspect there for what the teachers are teaching in class. Yeah. If they're doing something besides reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah, I agree. and the part of the problem is that this younger generation of teachers are going through their teacher training courses their college classes in very liberal college classes where they aren't taught accurate history themselves. They don't know it. They are taught a progressive education version of education. And so they go in the classroom and they teach what they've learned. And so, that's another aspect of the challenge that we're up against, because the colleges are teaching our teachers to be very liberal minded. And so that's where it gets really hard.
Right.
And I don't know what to do about that unless we implement teacher training that actually teaches them true history from original source documents. But, most teachers are so swamped and busy right now. They're like, we don't have time to go back to school and relearn everything.
Right.
And a lot of it is the online curriculum that is made available to them, that they don't have to create their own lesson plans. They just download from the open education resources that have been pre-selected for them that are much more liberal themselves. All of this, they think that they're told they have choice, right? But those choices that are on there for them have already been narrowed down to fit a more liberal progressive agenda. So whatever they pick from there is going to have that liberal slant. That's why we need to go back to original source documents also, because the curriculums have been corrupted.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Education now was so different when I was growing up. It baffles me, some of the things, because I have a 22-year-old and a 16-year-old, and the things they used to come home with school with, and I'm like, that's not exactly how that works. And I can't tell you how many different confrontations I had with teachers throughout the years through their schooling because of the false history they were putting up, or the false arithmetic, or what have you. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. This is this simple right here. It's done deal. But it's we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to do it fast because the progressive agenda in our education has grabbed hold. The Fabian socialists have almost succeeded on their goal. Mm-hmm. And to the point where if you don't conform, you're a racist. That's very bad. Yeah. I mean, come on, I'm a black guy and I get called a white supremacist all the time. It baffles me how that even happens. But okay, okay.
I know we're living in a really backwards, upside down, inside out world.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Like, yeah. Anyway.
And I represent the school. The public school in my area, and I just think there are so many things to fix. And there's a lot of good teachers out there that are still, especially here in Utah, that would never dream of teaching that stuff. But a lot of times their hands are tied. And I hear from teachers on a regular basis now, especially that I'm in this position, that they are afraid to speak up, and their hands are tied, and they feel like they are being made to teach these things. I had one teacher in the public child care system for over 4 and 5 year olds she was expected to teach this Martin Luther King Jr. curriculum, and which sounds great, right? Until you start reading through it, and they completely twist what Martin Luther's whole mission was, and they're teaching these little kids to be activists and to stand up at pulpits and give speeches and write signs and march for their favorite cause. They instead of, they ask them to say, what's your dream? And then after they've told them about, all of these social justice issues. And so instead of kids saying, I want to be a fireman when I grow up, or I want to be a ballerina, or, these dreams that kids have had for, forever. Mm-hmm. Now they're being taught that a dream is a social justice cause. Here are all the problems in the world. Which one do you want to be your dream to fix? Right. And they're training them up to be these little activists. That is not what we need to be focusing on. We need to be focusing on academics and giving them the skills to have a successful life. And to have the critical thinking skills, the analytical thinking skills that they need in order to become successful, contributing members of society that can help create and innovate. We don't need millions of activists. We need smart, educated people that can create and innovate and understand the free market so that we can get our country flourishing again.
Amen. I can.
And so that they're prepared to raise strong families, and teaching that success sequence, that if you want to be successful and not be stuck in poverty, then you need to get your education, whether that's a homeschool or a charter school or a public school or a private school. You get your education, you do your very best, and then you graduate and you get a job and you get married before you have kids. And if you follow that success sequence, the vast majority of them do not stay in poverty. They can lift themselves out of poverty just by following that simple success sequence.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, I appreciate you, Miss Natalie, for taking time out this evening to talk to me about this very important, very, very important. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot more conversations. I'd love to have another conversation with you later on after the fact here about this, because, this is something this is one of the things you do have to counter and start talking solutions on how to counter, instead of, we're at the point now, we know they're already out here with the critical race theory. Now we have to come up with a solution to counter that, and we're definitely on the right track again with integrating Black history in the American history books all year long, not just 1 month. That's an awesome thing. That's a start. The rest of it, how that's going to look, time is going to tell us what that needs to look like. As these radical agendas keep coming at us, we'll know how to fix them as they present themselves. So,
absolutely,
I appreciate you, Miss Natalie.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for talking.
Oh, no doubt about it. You want to let folks know how to, I know most of the people probably had the same friends on Facebook, but for the ones that are coming in, could you tell them how they could find you on social media or what have you, so they can find you?
Natalie Cline, Facebook, and if it's a private account now after I got bombarded, so you'll have to friend request me. Right. My public page is still public, and you can go on there and see all of those that have bombarded it. It's completely blown up with all kinds of craziness, and I'm not really on there monitoring or reading it, so it's just a free for all over there. But that's Natalie J. Cline, school board, state school board. You can find it that way.
Find her. Make sure y'all watching the Chiron that's going on at the bottom of the video there. There's a petition there to sign to support Miss Natalie. So go ahead and hit that. I've already put the link in the comments down there. So y'all can scroll back, find the petition, click on it, sign it, all that good stuff. Support Natalie, because she is one of the ones fighting a good fight for us out here. To make sure we don't bring any type of morality into our education system, because morality does not belong there. It belongs in the home where it belongs. Yeah. And we need to stop it out at all costs, because if we don't stop this, then they will order the education system. The government will order the education system to raise our children. And that's not a place you want to be. Yeah. At all. I mean, if people look back at history and look back at the Bolshevik Revolution, that's what Lenin started with before he started burning cities and all kinds of other stuff. So there is one piece we do need to teach at school that is value based, and it's the only one. And anything beyond it reeks of an agenda, and that is teaching our children to treat others as they would like themselves to be treated. That's it. Period. Right, that's and it, that. Right, then we don't have the divisiveness. That's it. That's right it. There. We can stand solid on that. Everybody should be able to get behind that. There's nothing controversial about it. No, nothing at all. Again, I appreciate you, Miss Natalie, for taking time out this evening, and we will talk again real soon. Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much, Roderick. You're welcome. Thank you. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.